Okay. So Tony has this great presentation for everybody here. This is obviously a very important topic, but also confusing at times. So he is letting everyone ask questions during, if there are any clarifications that he needs to make or anything you have during his presentation, feel free to come off mute. And I will also try to monitor the chat as best I can, but feel free to come off mute. And there will also be time at the end for any other questions that don't get answered, or any others that you have. So without further ado, Tony, take it away.
Thank you, Sinclair. I see a couple of familiar faces already. Rebecca, I work with her. Saida, so good to have you all, as well as the entire Sunshine community. This idea came up during a conversation that Quandra and I had, I think back last month, and we were just talking about some of the needs that the businesses that I work with had. And I mentioned that there was a lot of discussion about asset planning and protection for business owners. And that's something that I would always bring up with the clients just to really get an understanding of what their exit strategy is and what they're looking to accomplish with their businesses, and then how they're protecting themselves today. So, as Sinclair said, this is a very interactive session. I'm going to go as slow as possible and to be as thorough as possible. However, it may be some parts of the presentation may be a little bit challenging, but please either connect in the chat or raise your hand, and Sinclair will point it out to me, as I can't see you during the presentation, but we will stop and make sure that we address your concerns, because I want to make sure that everyone gets something out of this session. So with that being said, let's just get started. Asset protection and estate planning is crucial, not just if you have a business, but it's complicated when you do have a business. I believe the first estate plan that my wife and I did was back in 2007 in Chicago. And it took a lot of attorneys to get that done. But the important piece that we were concerned about then was what happens when we were flying a lot? What happens with our child if anything happens to us? And that's really how it started. And in simple terms, estate planning is a way to protect the things that you own, whether it's personal or even if it's business. So here are a couple of different ways to look at it. When you look at personal assets, what are the things that individuals own, right? And Sinclair popped a poll up if you guys can answer that question. And I really want to understand where you all are. But assets are listed as any tangible or even non-tangible things that you own as an individual. So tangible is pretty easy, concrete things, homes, auto, money that you have in the bank, artwork, jewelry businesses, etc. So anything that you own is considered a personal asset. A non-tangible thing could be something like you are a beneficiary on a life insurance policy for someone who you know. It could be a parent or a loved one. So if you're a beneficiary on an insurance policy, that policy will become an asset of yours upon their death. And that's very important. We'll get into that a little bit later in the conversation. So I'm looking at some of these poll results, and out of 10 people, say 7 own homes. That's very important. And we'll get into that in a little bit. Now, when we think about company assets, what are the things that a company can own? Real estate. Maybe you have an office or you have a retail store that you actually own but not lease. That could be one. Vehicles, delivery vehicles, the bank accounts that you have. Also, one thing that's important to remember as an asset are your accounts receivables, meaning if you have clients and they owe you money, that's considered from an accounting standpoint as an account receivable. That's considered an asset. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about why that's important a few minutes down the road. Any equipment and furniture you have, it's an asset for your business. IP or intellectual property, if you own a patent, for example, Or if you're a software developer and you've developed software over a period of time and you're selling that software to other parties, it's not something that you can touch, but it is in your intellectual property for your company. And then inventory, which is extremely important. If you have inventory that you purchased and you're taking that inventory and you're reselling it to others, to other businesses or other individuals, as long as it's in your possession, it's considered your asset. So you need to insure it. You also are responsible for it. And it could be a liability as well. One of the most important things that I stress with the businesses that I work with at Sunshine and outside of Sunshine is understanding the reason why we need to separate personal and corporate assets. Oftentimes, people are paying bills through their corporation for their personal use and vice versa. When you look at the separation, you as an individual have your own responsibilities. You have your own cell phone bill, car note, mortgage, rent. Those are things that you are uniquely responsible for. It has nothing to do with a business. On the other side, a corporation is just a legal entity all by itself. So consider a corporation another person. So that company has its own responsibilities, rent, phone bills, insurance, all of those things, transportation. You do not want to mix those things or intermingle those things because there are really big ramifications for that, short term and long term, especially when it comes to asset protection and estate planning. Sinclair's going to pop another poll up here, but I really wanted to kind of go through this slide and really spend a couple of seconds here. So if you all can answer that question, that's going to give us a lot of insight into where you all are in your business journey. There are a few different business types that I'll point out. There are others, but these are the main ones that I see as I go through my life. So a DBA or a sole proprietor, it's really you as an individual. The government is allowing you to use a different name other than your government name, your God-given name that your parents gave you to operate a business. Everything else is all about you. So your taxes, it's all in your personal income. Pretty much everything you do is going to be in your personal or that DBA name. Then we go down to limited liability corporations, your LLCs, and you have a couple of different forms of that. So you have a single member, which means that there's one person registered in your LLC, and then you have a multi-member LLC, which means you have multiple members or partners within that corporation. Then you also have some C Corp and an S Corp. So I look at this poll here. We have one person that's a DBA, one that's in C Corp, two that's an S Corp. And then the vast majority, the other 11 that I see here are LLCs, and 8 of those are single member and 3 are multi-member. And I really want to dig into that. But the difference really between an S Corp and a C Corp, an S Corporation at the end of the year, the profits that your company makes will then be transferred to your personal income as the owner of that corporation. So for example, if your business makes $10,000 in profit at the end of the year, your company is not going to pay income tax on that profit. It's going to go to your personal income tax. So you as an individual are going to pay personal income tax on those profits. The tax rates go up and down, it seems like every presidential cycle, right? So they're probably going to change again at the beginning of this year or sometime in 2025. The reason why I say that is corporate tax rate. So for a C corporation, the tax rates were actually lower than they were for an individual. I'm sure you all have heard and probably were very mad about, like everybody else, that Warren Buffett or some very wealthy people pay less taxes than their secretaries do. The reason for that is because most of that money is funneled through a C corporation, and the tax rate is lower than it is for an individual. So an individual, you could be paying 30% of the money you bring home in taxes. A corporation may pay 8 to 14%. The important thing about the C corporation, though, is that C corporation will actually grow. That company will grow in value. An S corporation will not grow in value because it never retains the income. That makes sense. Because remember, at the end of the year, that income, that revenue goes, the profit goes over to the individual. And then you have the 501c3 and the 501c6. And those, that could be any form of a business. It could be an LLC, a C corp, or an S corp. Here's one of the things that I would say that this is the reason why I stress with everyone that I can speak with is blurring these lines. If you look at the left side, the personal side, and we get a gray area when we blend black and white, right? So if you're looking at your personal expenses and income, and then you're looking at your business expenses and income, if you are doing any one of these four things, again, using your company money to pay your personal bill, even if your business is paying your cell phone bill, and you're not using that cell phone exclusively for business purposes, that becomes an issue. Same thing with company equipment and resources. For example, I know a lot of people did this after COVID, which was they went out and they bought a vehicle in their company name because maybe they didn't qualify in their personal names, or maybe it was just in their minds easier to buy a vehicle through their company than their personal name. That if you're using that vehicle for personal use, or you're paying your company bills through your personal money or vice versa, then that's where you get that gray area. And that gray area is extremely dangerous when it comes to asset protection. And the reason is because there is no clear demarcation point between you as an individual and you as a business owner, and your business having its own entity. When we think about why this is important, let's look at what the government's position is on this, okay? The government has a say-so no matter what you do, whether it's taxes, business ownership, the type of business that you have. It's all going to come down to what the government thinks about you and your business. And here's the important thing is the government's position is this: you as an individual are responsible for your own bills and your own income, period. The same thing with your business. And what happens is if the government can't see a clear distinction when you're filing your taxes, for example, and you can't prove that you use your cell phone 100% of the time for your business, that may not be an issue this year, but that may catch up with you in a couple of years. If they want to start doing reports on show us the mileage that you're using for your vehicles, which is a real thing, and you're doing 50,000 miles a year on a company car or company vehicle, but you work from home, the question is going to become with the IRS is, what are you driving so much for if you have a home-based business? Or why are you driving 50,000 miles a year and you're not making deliveries? You're not showing us that you're going to conferences, any of those things. Then what they can do is they can refuse or they can reject that deduction that you're trying to make. And then you personally will be liable for that. So we want to be very clear as you're starting out, whether you've already done this or whether you're looking to protect your assets moving forward. The key thing is, especially now that we're coming up on a new year, beginning of 2025, start separating everything now, right? If you got to, again, if you're going to use your cell phone, just in the company name, use it for cell phone purposes. And there are ways that you can do that and still use it for personal use. But what you'll have to do in those examples is if you're using your cell phone 25% of the time for personal use, you can only write off 75% of that bill then as a business expense. And we'll talk about why having an accountant and an attorney is extremely important. Here's why the government's position matters. Again, we talked about a few of these things, but when you really get into business ownership and you've been around for a long time, I've been doing this for 33 years, and I've probably seen almost everything that you can see in business, right? Friends sued, friends that I know have gone out of business, filed bankruptcy, just everything that you can imagine. You're in business long enough, you will see or experience every single piece of it. The government will determine your personal income liability. Same thing with your corporate liability. And what that means is if you ever get to a point where you have to sit in front of an attorney and justify what you're doing in your business and why that's not personal liability or personal, or those aren't personal liabilities or assets, at a certain point, you'll have to sit down in front of somebody and explain it. And if you can't quickly explain it even to yourself, you're not going to be able to explain it to a lawyer who's really good at digging through these things. And this is just an extremely important piece because some actions that you take can become criminal as opposed to just civil, meaning that if you're not listing things correctly on your false return, that could be a criminal action, not just a civil action, right? So we want to be very clear. And none of this is to scare you all, but what it is to say, here are some of the realities of having assets, having a business, and for you all starting a business and really wanting to grow your companies. Here are some of the liabilities and the areas of exposure that we all have, right? So you have things, personal lawsuits. And what happens when you have a personal lawsuit? Everything that you personally own has to be disclosed. And you go through something called a deposition. They want to know every single asset that you own, everything. And you have to list it. If you hide it, that becomes a criminal matter. Same thing with income tax garnishments or liens. So, for example, if you owe a certain amount of money in especially federal income tax and you don't pay, the government will move to seize your personal assets, your personal property, and they will liquidate it, meaning they would sell it. And if there's money left over, they'll give you the change. So you see why this personal asset thing is extremely important. Same thing with what happens with your business and your personal items once you pass. That's another extremely important piece in the asset planning phase. You also have judgments from lawsuits. So everybody's in business. When you're in business, you run a higher risk of running into situations where you and your clients, or you and your business partners, or you and your employees, for some reason, have a situation where you don't necessarily agree on everything. And a lot of times, it's going to take a third party to help resolve those issues. Well, that's where the legal system comes in. It's either mediation or it could be a lawsuit. But the point is, again, there's going to be a time in your business where you're sitting at the table with a third party who's going to look at everything objectively. And they're going to make determinations based on your actions, not what you say, but your actions. When you file for bankruptcy, either corporate or personal, depending on which one, just take Chapter 7, for example, was just a total liquidation. Chapter 11 and 13 are reorganization. But when you look at that, what happens is the same thing. It's that program is administered by the Department of Justice. So that's the first thing that should really put a little bit of fear in our hearts, right? The Department of Justice. Those are the prosecutors for the federal government. And what they do is they assign a trustee. A trustee is a law firm who is a vendor with the Department of Justice. And what happens is they get paid, I think on average, about $50 for each case. And you would say to yourself, well, why are they even working for the Department of Justice as a bankruptcy firm? Well, the reason is because on average, they keep about 10% of what they collect. So for example, if you have a business and you file bankruptcy, they're going to look at every single asset your business has. And then we talked a few minutes ago about whether you're paying company bills with personal money and paying personal bills with company money. What they would be able to argue is they would say, oh, I see. So your company ABC was also paying your personal car note, or your company was also paying for your rent or your mortgage. And guess what they have the opportunity to do at that point? They have the opportunity to attach those assets. Even though they're in your personal name, they can now attach claim to those assets because they cannot see a clear determination and a clear demarcation point between what you were doing in your business and what you were doing in your personal life. And that's when this angst comes in, right? Which is, that's not fair. I have a business. I have an LLC. It's supposed to protect me. It's supposed to be separate. Yes, it's supposed to be that way. But the actions that the owner takes, or the members of those LLCs, those actions that you take are going to determine whether that separation remains in effect. Another thing about the bankruptcy court, personal or business, they have something called a clawback period. And it's 12 months before a company or an individual files for bankruptcy. They can go back and undo any financial transaction that you made. For example, if you knew you were going to file for bankruptcy in December and you decided to give your wife your car or give your husband some jewelry and transfer it to them or sell it to a cousin, thinking that after your court case is over that they're going to sell it back to you, they can go back and claw back and undo those transactions. And those items will go back to your personal name and they will seize those items and sell them even a year before that. This is extremely important for you to know in order to protect your business. You want to keep your business as far away from your personal life as possible. Don't pay any bills, any personal bills through your company bank accounts. Here are just a few reasons why, as a business owner, you all need to make sure that you have the protections that we're talking about here. In business, at some point, you may be late on a business loan. Or a breach of contract is simply you have an agreement, you're selling products in a store, in Whole Foods, for example, and you're supposed to deliver a quantity of 500 boxes, and you only ship 400. Technically, that's a breach of contract. Now, where do they go from there? That depends on them and how fast you can cure that, meaning how fast can you make that order whole? Payment disputes. Maybe there's a situation where the pricing changed and you need to increase pricing because your costs have gone up, but your client will not allow you to increase the price that you're charging them. And if you don't increase your prices, there's a very likelihood that maybe you go out of business. And that's a pricing issue. And sometimes you're going to have to get mediation for that, but you want to be protected. Accidents and errors, if you have a physical business, if someone slips on your floor, that's a liability for you. If you're operating a business that doesn't have a physical space, like in IT, for example, or consulting, or some of the other service-related businesses, there's something called errors and omissions. And what that means is if you give someone bad advice that's detrimental to their business, they can sue you for that, especially in technology. If you're doing something that creates a data breach, there's an issue. That can open you up to liability as well. Discrimination and defamation, what that really is that's really referring to social media more than anything. So if you're posting personal comments about someone and your personal account is connected to your business account, there's an association right there that the judge can say, I don't know if it was you as a company or you as an individual making these comments, but those comments created a negative impact on this person or this company or this institution. So with all of these things, just in the normal course of business, These are all things that every single one of you and every single one of us need to be keenly aware of, because as much as we don't think it will happen to us, we're all more likely to experience these things as we're operating businesses. So
Tony,
here's,
really quick,
yes,
the question in the chat.
Mhm.
What if I pay my business with my personal?
It creates the same effect. There's two things to that. One, from an accounting standpoint, an accountant will probably classify that as a loan to the corporation, right? And depending on what type of company you have. And then you'll be building up. Then what'll happen is your company will now have debt to the shareholder, to the owner. So eventually that company needs to pay that money back unless it's a gift. But that's an accounting thing. As far as the government is concerned, it's the same thing. It's why are you paying your company bills? Because again, you're making that connection between you as an individual and you as in your company. So in that particular case, if your company is running low on money and you need to have certain things done, the proper thing would be is to work with your accountant and make it a loan to the company. You don't have to go through and draft 50 pages of loan documents, but it should show up as a loan, because then your company has a liability on the books and you are nothing more than a creditor for your business at that point. And a creditor is way different than the owner. So does that answer the question? So I hope it does. Any more questions, Sinclair, on that topic?
Um, Regina just asked, do you need docs? Regina,
Docs?
expand on that. Feel free to come off mute.
Yeah.
Yeah, you say you didn't have to have a long drawn out loan form, but do we need to have some type of agreement that we gave a loan to our business?
I would always draft something. It could be just one sheet of paper,
Okay.
as long as it states that you are loaning money to your corporation and what the amount is and what the payment terms are. You want to have payment terms in there. It doesn't have to be that they pay you back monthly or annually. You can say that this loan is going to mature in 5 years. The important piece is that you are making something very formal in writing that lets everyone know that you are not just, it's not a, you're not commingling funds, so to speak, if that makes sense. Now, the other thing is your company down the road could forgive that loan, but that's a whole nother thing you want to talk to with your accountant.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Companies forgive loans all the time. And another thing that does is going to give you a benefit. So at the end of the year, let's just say, let's go back to that 10,000 that your company had in profit. And let's just say that you loaned the company $2,500. Now the company can write you a check at the end of the year for $2,500. It's not going to show up as income for you because it's going to be a loan that's repaid. And then it's going to lower the tax rate, not the tax rate, I'm sorry, the taxable amount for your corporation. So now instead of a $10,000 profit, your company only shows a $7,500 profit. You get the $2,500 back in your bank account and you don't pay taxes on it because that money was a loan to your company.
So even with the interest that you, because you have to, do I have to charge the company, my company interest, and then
No,
I do not have to?
no, you can do a zero interest loan if you want.
Oh, okay.
Yep, yep.
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry. Can you repeat what you just told Regina?
Of course. If you are going to pay company bills, one of the best things to do is to do it in the form of a loan to your company. If you can do it in a lump sum, that's even better. But let's just say that you needed to do payroll. Instead of just taking some money and transferring it to your to your company bank account, draft a letter, just a letter by yourself. You can draft it or have your accountant draft it. And you can use the same letter and over and over and over again and just use it as a template. But the key is you want to make it very clear that that money going to your company is a loan. When the accountant or you, if you're using a system like QuickBooks, when you code that income, meaning how you categorize it in QuickBooks, it's not revenue, it's not income, it's not a sale, right? It's going to be a loan from a shareholder. So when they categorize that, your company will instantly have debt. It's instantly going to have a liability to you as a person. The good thing is when it's time for that company to pay you back, you won't pay income tax on that income because it was a loan. You already paid income tax to make the money to be able to loan your company some funds. And then it's also going to reduce the net profits that your company would have to be taxed on because it's paying back a loan. So some of the money that it received, you got $100,000 for the whole year and somebody gave you $25,000 loan, your income is really $75,000 because $25,000 was a loan. That's not money that came in from product sales or services. So you're not paying tax on that. It's a loan. You're going to have to pay that loan back at a certain point, which is a different type of expense. It's a different type of a liability. Did that help?
Absolutely.
Okay, perfect.
Yes.
So it's like, yeah, any more, Sinclair?
That looks like it is it right now. And again,
Okay.
Eddie, feel free to come off mute as well. I will obviously keep checking the chat. But yeah.
So
And
I
these are
have
good questions, and I'm
I
glad
have-
you all are asking them. It's good questions.
So I do have a question
Mhm.
about the structure of your company. If you have contractors, is it better for you to be a S corp or a C corporation?
What type of contractors do you have?
Uh, so I provide a service. So I hire out for certain projects.
Yeah, what type of service do you provide, though?
So web development
Okay, and you
and
hire
marketing.
talent?
Yes,
Okay, and are they in the country, outside of the country?
they're in the country.
Okay. So this is a good question because everybody has to deal with this at a certain point. The term contractors came from the laws that were established years and years and years ago. And it was all related to building contractors, construction workers. That's where the laws are really written for. IT and some of the things that we do today, VAs and some of the workers we have today, aren't really contractors. A contractor, typically, what the law used to state was, for example, if I was an independent contractor, that means that I was like a brick mason and
Mhm.
I had a toolbox, literally a toolbox with a hammer and nails and screwdrivers in it. And I would show up to a job site and I would provide service for that company 1 day, 2 days, or 10 months. And then I would go home and that company would pay for that, give me money for that time. But then the government, they wouldn't take taxes out of my pay because I was an independent contractor. Okay. And it was
Mhm.
my responsibility at the end of the year to go file taxes. And then I would be taxed on all of that income because taxes were never taken out. Fast forward to today, that same term contractor does not live up to the sign of the times. It's not current. And what I mean by that is, and this is why it's extremely important, which is why I put on the bottom of all of these slides, a consultant attorney and an accountant, a certified public accountant, because it's a very, very fine line between when someone is an employee and someone is a contractor. And the thing I would tell you is each industry is going to have a unique stance and unique position on this. In your space, I know that space very well. The reality is you really want to talk to an accountant about that. And they should dig into, are these people providing anything? Anything? Are they individuals? Are you contracting out to a company, right? All of that is going to matter. All of that. I had that situation a number of years ago where we were using some 1099 quote unquote contractors for technical work. And one of them, when they saw their tax bill at the end of the year, they flipped out, right? Because now they had to pay taxes on it. And then their accountant said, well, you should go back to the company and tell them to pay your taxes for you. And so we had to fight with the IRS over that. And we wound up winning, but it cost a lot of money. It cost a lot of money. And I'll tell you, the thing that saved us was we had subcontractor agreements which stated very clearly that they were independent contractors, that taxes weren't being taken out, that they were using their own tools, which back in the day used to be hammers, but now it could be laptops and phones and software.
Right, right.
All
Like
of
they
those
use
things.
their own laptops and phones and everything. I don't provide them any equipment to do their work. They should already have it.
Do you have a set schedule that they're supposed to work?
Their hours, they just have so many hours they have to work a month and get projects done.
But there's no set time. For example,
No.
you have to be working from
No.
8:30 to 5.
No.
Okay, good. Those are good things because then it really shows that they are not an employee. If it smells like an employee and it sounds like an employee, it's an employee, which means you're giving them a desk, you're giving them a computer, you're telling them what time they have to work, you're supervising them. All of those are things that you would do for the employee. So you see the distinction, right?
Right, I do.
Yeah. But going back to your original question, should that be a C Corp, an S Corp, and even an LLC? I don't necessarily know that that matters very much. I think the most important thing is that you have a written agreement for them as independent contractors, and it states very clearly that they are not employees, that you are, and you have to state very clearly, and it has to be listed out that they have control over the tools that they use and the time that they spend and things of that nature. And that's when I would talk to an accountant and an attorney and have that document drafted up. Once you have it drafted, you can use that thing for the next several years unless the laws change.
Okay.
At the end of the day, though, and this is for everyone, the government is going to go after the person or the entity that they think has the deepest pockets. So they don't care if it's you or the employee or that independent contractor. They want that tax money. So chances are they're going to scrutinize you more than that individual. So I hope that answers your question.
I had one more question.
Of course.
I wanted to circle back to the point that you made about having a corporation, because if I'm an S Corp, the money, the profits are going on my personal income tax, but as a corporation, it stays in the business to gain value.
As a C Corp, it does.
As a C Corp. So at what revenue, how much revenue does a company have to make when you say, hey, it's time for you to be a C Corp? Or do you suggest, based upon the business plan, if I plan on earning, a substantial amount of money based upon, what I'm working to build, should I start out as a C Corp, or should I be an LLC, and then once I pass a certain revenue threshold, I convert? Like, what is your suggestion there?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm going to defer to an accountant for that. But I'll give you my opinion, right? But don't take it to the bank. But so I've had S Corp, C Corp, LLCs, and nonprofits as well. And here's the reality: there is no right answer to that question. The thing that I would tell you is understanding where you're trying to go is extremely important with your business. Okay. So I think each of you all, if there was there are several things that I would say you want to take away today, but one of the important things is understanding what you're building. If you are just doing a side hustle, right? You're just trying to make some extra money to pay bills and to go on a vacation. That's okay. There's no knock to that. But there's a certain type of business that may be better suited for that. If you're looking to build a company that you want to sell, you want to sell it to a strategic or financial buyer in 5 years or 10 years, you want that company to have an extreme amount of value, right? So what's the value that you're building in a corporation? When someone looks to purchase, if it's a strategic buyer is someone who's going to purchase your company, and they're going to replace you and your executive team, and they're going to run that company. They're just going to probably do it better than you did based on what they think, and they're going to grow it and scale that business and make huge profits, and that's okay. A financial buyer is just like a real estate investor. They're going to look at your company, they're going to ask for a discount, and all they're going to do is put some paint on the walls and put some shrubs outside and sell it, right? So the value that you're trying to get out of your company will determine the type of company you have. So if you want a company that's worth 50 million, $100 million after a certain period of time, chances are it's not going to be an LLC. Because if you remember at the end of the year, those profits are going out of your company. In S Corp, those profits will remain in your company. So if you profited 100,000 this year, you may pay $15,000 in taxes at a corporation if the tax rate was 15%, for example. But that 85,000 sits in your bank account. It's there. You can invest it, you can grow it within that company. So that's really what the difference is. So I think to answer your question, understand what you want to do with your company long term. That's really important. And then sit down with an accountant and explain where you're trying to go. And the thing that I would say, not all accountants are created equal, right? I will look for one that has a lot of experience. I would also look at one who understands how to value companies. And some of them may even do valuations. But I would sit down and explain to them, I'm trying to grow a company. I want to have a board. You can't have a board with an LLC, right? An LLC, you have members and partners. You don't have boards. With the S Corp, you can have an advisory board or you can have a formal board. C corporations, you can have formal boards. Your titles also change when you get to S Corp and C Corp. So now you have an executive committee or ExCom. Again, LLCs, which just have members. So with the C Corp and S Corp, you can have a secretary, a treasurer, a vice president, a president, a chairman. You have that board. And what you may want to do one day is part of your exit, you may, well, not your exit, but your transition, you may want to hire a president to run the day-to-day operations or a chief executive officer, and you elevate yourself to the position of chairperson, and you have a board, and you just focus on the strategic direction of the company, but you're not involved in the day-to-day. And that's also part of the conversations you have with your accountant. So does that help?
Yep, that definitely helps.
Okay, excellent. So here are a couple of ways to protect your assets. And I appreciate these questions because this is your session, right? So whatever you all need to ask to get info out of it and get value, let's do it. One of the things is insurance. On the business side, I always tell people to get at least some general liability insurance, right? And you can get insurance for a couple $100 a year, up to several thousand. State Farm, Allstate, all of them. The thing that I would say is you may want to look for a company like The Hartford because they focus only on business insurance. They may be a little bit more expensive, but that's what they focus on. And I know Sinclair threw up a poll about protecting your assets, and this is the time that that I want you guys to provide some input, which is, who's on your team, because everything we're getting into moving forward is about your team. So I see a couple people work with both an accountant and an attorney. The majority of people don't work with either. And that's okay because this is a starting point. So there's no shame here, right? Some people only work on the accountant. So I want to dispel one myth is that it's expensive to work with attorneys and accountants. It's not. When you determine that you want to work on an accountant, you're not paying them necessarily on a monthly basis. And if that's their business model, I probably would not necessarily go that route up front. An accountant is there really, you want to ask them, you want to ask some questions anytime there's a financial decision that you need to make with your company. Should I buy something? Should I sell something? I'm looking to possibly change the structure of my company. Tell me what that would do for me. For example, a lot of businesses are cash businesses, right? And with the cash business, you can be set up as on an accrual basis or cash basis. What accrual means is your revenue hits your bank account. As soon as your revenue hits your bank account, it's realized. Well, as soon as you invoice, I should say. So, for example, the young lady with the tech company, you're working with those contractors. So let's just say that you did a project today. Let's just say that it was December 15th, and this is a very real situation that I dealt with this years ago. Let's just say that you invoice your customer on December 15th. Okay, you invoice them for $50,000. They don't pay you. Let's just say they don't pay you to February of the next year. If you on an accrual basis, as soon as you invoice, that becomes revenue. So come January 1st, that's revenue that you have to pay tax on. And guess what? You never did receive the money. Okay. So you would say, well, why is a business even on accrual basis? That's a good question that you and your accountant should ask and answer. If you're on a cash basis, which means you can invoice December 15th, but if you don't get paid to February of the next year, your company does not realize or doesn't post that income until the money hits your bank account. And the reason I mentioned December, because December 31st at midnight, anything from an accrual basis, now you're liable for with taxes. On a cash basis, you're only liable for it until that money hits your bank account, right? So that's why it's important to have an accountant that you can call in a moment's notice and get guidance. As far as an attorney is concerned, the attorney really is going to come in when you're looking at asset planning, because attorney is going to help you figure out how to put the structure in place to protect you for your business and your personal side of your house, right? I'll give you one thing that I would say now. I would imagine everybody in this session has a personal bank account. Okay, I'm just going to go with that idea. One of the first things that you all should do today, I mean, literally today, is log into your account and list a beneficiary on your personal bank account. I think most of the banks now, you can do it online. What's the reason for that? The reason is if you pass tomorrow and you don't have a beneficiary set up on your personal bank account, the likelihood that a family member who you want that money to go to is going to get it is going to be distant, right? At some point, you'll have to do an affidavit and things of that nature to try to prove that they're related to you and that money should go to them, right? That's one little thing that each of you all can do right now to pass on anything that you have in the form of money to someone you care about. Just that little thing, it's free to do. And there are 1,000 things like that. On a corporate bank account, you can't have a beneficiary, only on a personal bank account. So I always recommend business insurance to protect your business, especially if you have a physical location. You should have some insurance, slip and fall, things of that nature. If you're operating a business doing intelligence work or work offline or online, I should say, you want to have some general liability clause in there as well. And the Hartford is a good company. Again, State Farm and Allstate, they do small business policies. So you can check with those companies. As far as asset allocation is concerned, we talked about that, how to protect your assets, keep everything separate. Everything separate. And I'll show you an example of that in a minute. We talk about legal structures. I'm not sure can anyone just come off of mute? And this is not a test, but I just really want to understand, excuse me, where you are with the LLC thing, because the majority of people responded and the poll said that they were LLCs. Can anyone quickly tell
I
me the
can.
difference between a single and a multi-member LLC and why it's important?
I believe the multi-member LLCs, you have something called a K1, is it? Or K2 that is filed when the single member LLC is only a 1040, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. Anybody else?
It's also multiple members as well with the multiple versus a single member. Yeah.
Do you all know why it's important? The important legal difference between the two, though?
Between the between the S corp and the C corp.
Between a single member and a multi-member LLC.
What is
Probably the way they treat single members compared to partnerships. I mean, compared to multiple members. Does it have something to do with tax purposes when you have a single member versus multiple members?
Yes, but that's not the most important thing. So we'll get into it in the next couple of slides. But I just really wanted to kind of take a pulse because this is extremely important since most of y'all are single member LLCs.
Is it the single member is if you don't claim to be taxed as an S corp, it's almost like you're a sole prop?
Well, when you file taxes having an LLC, you can either choose to be filed as an S corp or just an LLC, which is all basically the same. It's all going to your personal income.
So with the LLC, if you have a single LLC, you can't add anybody to your like say for instance you wanted to have a manager or something. You can't add anybody. You have to make it a multiple LLC to be able to add managers to it. Is that right?
Yeah, and that's just the ownership structure. Some people call them managers and some people call them partners. It's who's the legal owners of that entity. But you can hire, like if you wanted to hire an operations manager, they're not technically an owner of that LLC. It's just a position in the company. That's all. The reason why law firms, most of them, well, a lot of them are LLCs. And as you see in the movies, everybody's trying to make partner, right? It's because now the partners share in the profits from that company. Just the average employees don't. So if you're just a regular attorney, you're just getting paid, salary, maybe a little bit of commission or something or bonus. But at the end of the year, if that law firm made a $10 million profit, the 5 partners will probably walk away with $2 million each because each partner, that money is divided by the partners, not necessarily the workers in that organization. But there is a different reason, and I'll get into it. The last thing here, I'll move into trust right quick. The last thing here is trust. And trust, I'm going to explain it in a minute. Trust is one of those black holes that nobody seems to get a good concept of, but we're going to talk about that to help you out with that. So if we dig into the asset allocation, I keep bringing this up because it's extremely important. This is the easiest thing that each of you all can do right now to protect your businesses. One of the easiest things is to just pay your company bills with your company money and only use your company resources for company business. Period. I know for a fact there's probably somebody in this session tonight who has a company car, a car in their company name when they're using it for personal use. They probably got a baby seat in the back, right? You may let your friends or family use it. Technically, that's totally illegal, just for the record, right? Do you all remember when Trump's chief financial officer went to jail not too long ago? The reason he went to jail was because he had a company car and he did not list on his personal income tax that the company was paying for that vehicle. So he was getting free use of a company car. I only mention his name. We're not talking about politics. I mention his name just because it's a high profile name. What you should do is if you have a company vehicle and you use that company vehicle for your personal time, let's just say 25% of the time. At the end of the year, 25% of that usage you should be claiming on your personal tax return. That's how you protect yourself from being illegal, right? It's the same thing with a cell phone. It's the same thing with any other property. If you're using for personal use, you need to account for that. Your accountant needs to say, okay, you've only used this car 50% of the time for business, which means that the car note is $1,000 a month. So I have to list $250 a month times 12 months towards your personal income, and you're going to have to pay tax on that. That's the legal way to do that. The easy way is to just don't do it in the very beginning, right? So again, let's keep all of our assets separate. So here's where we're going to get into the LLCs and the difference between a single and a multi-member. And this is extremely important. I'm going to talk, let me take a step back and just talk about, again, the government, okay? Let's say that you were driving down the street in a personal car, or let's just say a company car. You were driving down the street and you're driving a company vehicle and you ran over a cat. And this cat was a superstar on TikTok. And this cat was worth $500,000. Hey, Lan, I see you out there. And this cat was worth $500,000, right? And you had car insurance that only covered $50,000. And now that owner of that cat is suing you as a person, or as a, whatever, you ran it over as a person. They're going to go to court, they're going to sue you, and chances are you're going to lose. And what's going to happen is they're going to get a judgment. And they're going to say, this cat was worth $500,000. You only have $50,000 in insurance coverage because that's going to be done in discovery, all your assets. Now you're responsible for paying them another $450,000. You got to ask yourself, where does that money come from? I don't have it. So part of the deposition, part of the discovery is that attorney is going to be granted authority by the court to examine every possible asset that you have. Everything. Everything. You have to disclose everything, or you're in violation of the court. Now you can go to jail for that. So you can disclose everything, right? Including the fact that you have a business. And say, oh, okay, they have a company. Okay, great. And they're going to look at that company and they're going to say it's a C Corp. I can't really do much with that because they're not really the owner unless they're a big stockholder. They're just the president. So you just really hold a position in that company, because with corporations, C Corp and S Corp, you're not an owner. You are an employee. You get a W-2 like everybody else. So technically, you can't hold that company liable for something that you did. Someone else couldn't hold it liable for something you did as an individual, unless you're a majority shareholder. So each company, when you do your articles of incorporation and you incorporate a business, you can issue stock, or you don't have to issue stock in that company. You can just keep the stock and never issue it. That determines the ownership of the firm. It's not who the president is. That's just a position. It's just a title. Most of the time, major corporations, the president and CEO are not the owners. The shareholders are the owners of those corporations. But here's where we go to LLCs, which the majority of you are. If you are a single member LLC, okay, and you have this $450,000 liability now, or even $25,000 liability, or whatever the issue is, that attorney is going to go back to court and they're going to get something called a charging order. And they're going to say, hey, judge, this person has an LLC. And it's a single member LLC. And how do they know? Because that's what's on file with the Secretary of State in Illinois. Okay. And they're going to look at that and they say, oh, it's a single member LLC. Now, in certain states, which is important while you deal with an asset planning attorney in the state where you live, because the laws are different. I think in Illinois, there's a clause that states that a charging order is the sole remedy when it comes to going after LLCs. What that means is an attorney cannot dissolve your corporation based on a court order. They can't dissolve your LLC. In other states, they can. They can go to a judge and say, this is a single member LLC. It's one person. I'm not affecting anybody else but them. I want that whole business shut down. And the judge will say, okay, it's done. And they will dissolve your whole corporation. Same thing if you go to bankruptcy court. Because what happens is that single member LLC is an asset of yours personally, just like a pair of shoes, just like a vehicle, just like some jewelry. It's nothing more than your personal asset at that point. And the idea of a limited liability corporation has no bearing whatsoever. So when you deal with the bankruptcy trustee, they do something called, they step into your shoes, meaning that when you agree to file bankruptcy, part of the agreement that you make when you sign a sheet of paper is that the trustee now has access to any asset that I own. So what do? They go into your single member LLC and they take everything that's in there. They take the money out the bank. If you own a car through your LLC, that becomes their property. If you own a building, it becomes their property. Everything, because as a single member, you are the only person making all of the decisions. Okay? A creditor can do that. And a creditor, even if they don't have the power, the judge doesn't give them the power to dissolve it, they can assume your position as well, meaning that they can act as you. So they can take any accounts receivable coming in from your clients and redirect that money to them to pay their plaintiff, their client. So you see, a single member LLC really doesn't have any protections whatsoever when it comes to assets. You are walking down the street naked. That's the reality, right? Now, what's the difference between that and a multi-member? Same situation. You ran over the cat. You got $450,000 in a judgment against you, or you filed for bankruptcy and you're in a position now you just can't pay. A multi-member LLC, a trustee, a bankruptcy trustee, or a judge will look at that LLC and say, well, it's 3 members in it. It's 4 members. It's 2 members. I can't hurt everybody because everybody wasn't liable for killing this cat or doing this thing. I can only punish that one person. Okay. So they can't dissolve that LLC because now they're punishing people who didn't do anything. That makes sense? Now, the thing about a multi-member LLC is to give it even more power. I listed a couple of things here in black that you should see for a multi-member LLC. One is, and Lana and I talked about this, Rebecca and I talked about this, is it's extremely important to have an operating agreement, but you don't have an operating agreement if it's just you, right? You can, but it doesn't carry much weight. An operating agreement really is an agreement between the members and the managers of an LLC, a multi-member LLC, that dictates how the company is going to operate. It could be a page long, it could be 100 pages long, doesn't matter. There is nothing that you have to have in it, and there's not stuff that you can have in it. Okay, so with that being said, to give yourself some legal protection, and this is one of the things that I have made sure my attorneys put in our operating agreements, is these 3 statements here, and there's a variation of them, that the corporation is not required to make equal payments to its members. If you had a multi-member LLC today, let's just say it's 3 members, and you don't have an operating agreement, the way the law basically defaults to is, let's just say that the company had $100,000, and every quarter, the members are going to each get an equal share. So every quarter, you guys are going to get $33,000 each, right? Now, what happens if you have that bankruptcy trustee who took over the place of that one member who had that liability? Or the creditor was there to say, hey, intercept every dollar that was supposed to be going to this person out of those 3, that's going to us to settle this claim. right? That statement that I just read to you gives that LLC the ability to make payments to one or two or all of its members or not. It's extremely important. What you really want to do from a legal standpoint is you want to frustrate. You want to make it like Obamacare. You can get rid of it if you wanted to because it's tied into so many different things, right? The next statement, the corporation is not required to pay or make distributions to each member. And then the third thing is members' position in the corporation are not assignable, nor are they transferable. So these three statements, I'll sum them up this way. If there was a bankruptcy trustee that wanted everything that you got coming to you from your LLC, right? If it's a multi-member, or if you had a creditor and they were trying to take everything, including all the money from your LLC, including the distributions that that company would make to you. These three statements basically say this: we're a multi-member LLC and we don't care what Jane Doe did. It's not our responsibility. We don't care, and we do not care about anything that you say, judge or trustee. So we're not going to pay Jane Doe. We don't have to pay Jane Doe. As a matter of fact, she's going to work here for free unless she quits. And what that does is it allows the LLC to keep functioning because nobody can take over that person's position. It's not, their membership is not transferable or assignable. So nobody can take over their position in LLC now. And you don't have to pay them at all for the rest of the time that they owe that debt. Now you go back to the outside, to that bankruptcy trustee or to that creditor. And what do they feel? They feel frustration. Why? Because you're using the law that was designed to protect you, and they don't like that. And it frustrates them. So what is that attorney going to do? That attorney is going to go back to their client and say, they don't have a home, they don't have a car, they got a business, the business is doing very well, but it's a multi-member LLC, and the members of that LLC said, go fly a kite, go pound sand, we're not giving you a dime, and we don't have to, here's our operating agreement. And that attorney is going to tell that cat owner, if you want to continue to pay me $500 an hour to go to court and do this for the next 20 years, you're not going to get any money. So let's just call it a wrap, let's resolve it now. The trustee for that bankruptcy court is going to say, I can't get any assets from that company. It's a dead end. Let's move on. That's what you all want to do to protect your assets. A single member LLC is you are walking down the street naked, period. Absolutely. Okay. Any questions on that? I know that can be confusing. Okay. C corporations, we talked about this. You're able to grow the value of your company, not just your individual personal wealth. So we'll go on to the next thing. And we're going to get into trust now. And this kind of ties into that last part of protecting your assets. I'll explain on the next slide what a trust is. So we'll just think of it this way. It's something that can hold your personal assets, and a trust can be owned. A trust can own part of your LLC as well, okay? And the value and the strength really comes into whether you have a revocable trust or irrevocable. The same way, whether you have protections as a single member or a multi-member LLC, it's the exact same, right? So here we are. So if you look at these two images, a revocable trust is a trust that the person who created it, meaning that you went to an attorney and said, I want to create a trust. And here's the simple thing. A trust is a sheet of paper that's notarized. That's it. That's all it is. Let's not even make it complex. It's a sheet of paper that you have, that it has some words on it, and it's notarized. And you keep it on file, your accountant keeps it, your attorney keeps it on file. That's all it is. That's it. The more practical example of one is a container. So if you look at these jars, right, you have a revocable trust. Now, revocable trust is the person. So let's just say that I created a trust. I went to an attorney and said, I want to have a trust called ABC Trust, and I want it to be revocable, which means I can put assets in that trust. And when I want to, I can remove assets from that trust, right? And that makes it less secure. Because again, if you look at a creditor or if you look at a bankruptcy trustee, if you are the person who can make decisions, then they can force you to make decisions that you don't want to make. An irrevocable trust is once I established it and I want to create an ABC trust, and let's just say that I want to change the title of my car and make the trustee owner, ABC Corporation is now the owner of that, the ABC Trust is now the owner of that car. I cannot go back and say, I want that car out of the trust. Once I put it in there, the top is sealed. I cannot take it out. There is somebody who gets appointed, who you appoint, called an executor of your estate. They can do things, but you can't. Now, the loophole there is if the executor of my estate is a cousin and I want them to remove something, they can. But going back to the creditor and the bankruptcy trustee, the trustee can't tell me, hey, go make your cousin do ABC, their exec. I can't do that. I can't make another person do anything. So as you see, the power becomes when you can make a decision about something, when you have firsthand ability to make a decision, that's when you lose a lot of your security, whether it's the type of company you have, whether it's the trust that you have, or anything like that.
We have a question in the chat really quick. What are the benefits of having an advisory board? LLC cannot have an advisory board, right?
You can, as a business owner, you can have an advisory board all day long. It's just not a legal part of your company, right? I've had advisors, you could get a group of 3 or 4 or 5 people together once a month and talk about your business all day long. It's just not a formal part of your business. I highly recommend you just getting a group of advisors together. You can call them mentors, anything else. They're just not an official part of your company. A board of directors is appropriate when you have an S Corp or C Corp, right? And even in that case, if you did, they are going to be decision makers who would impact the trajectory of your company. And what you want to do is you want to have an odd number and you want to have staggered terms, which means you want to have 3, 5, or 7. That way you never have a tie vote. That's one. And the second thing, the terms should be staggered. For example, you have election every other year, but the terms are 2 years, whatever the case is. That way you always have an existing board member in place, that you never have a completely new set of people on your board, because they won't have the continuity of understanding your company and the history there. Does that answer your question? Okay, so we'll move on. If it doesn't, just jump back in there.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. All right, so here's one thing about LLCs, and I know Rebecca and I have spoke about this before, right? Adding a member to your LLC does not have to be a human being. So I just want to make that clear. A company, you can have another LLC that's a member of your LLC. Your trust can own part of your LLC. A parent company can own trust. So this is just an example of how part of my estate plan is done. So it's a little bit more complex, but in a nutshell, I have an irrevocable trust. My wife and I both have irrevocable trusts, right? Each of our irrevocable trust owns 50% of a parent company, and that parent company is in a different state, okay? That parent company owns 100% of my company, my LLC, 100%. And Lana and I have talked about this. Lana Burks who's here, is one of our businesses that we work with. And here's the shocking thing, that I don't own anything. I don't own a car, a home, a wedding ring. I don't own shoes. I literally have 0 assets in my name, 0. And that's all strategic, right? And I'll show you a statement in the last 2 slides as to why that is. So I don't legally own anything. So if I ran over that cat, good luck. There's nothing to collect. There's absolutely nothing to collect. So if you look at this chart that I have here, you work from the bottom up. Again, the LLC is owned by a parent company, and that parent company is owned by two trusts. And that parent company is owned, again, with those trusts, but those trusts are irrevocable. So I can't even take the LLC out of that trust, even if I wanted to. The thing that I would say is that's a very complex plan that was drafted by a good set of attorneys here in Georgia. And that's the thing that I will recommend to you is
Excuse me.
Yes.
So does that involve like holding companies and things like that?
Yes, a parent company is a holding company, umbrella company. All of those terms are the same. They're synonymous with one another. It's just a company whose job is to hold assets. That's all it is. That's it. And I didn't want to complicate it too much, but for example, I have another company, and that company only holds title to a vehicle. That's it. So under this parent company, it actually owns the LLC that I have, right? And then it actually owns another company whose sole purpose is just to own a vehicle for vehicles. That's it. And that's really kind of a holding company. Are you all, you live in Chicago, you see Walsh Construction, McHugh Construction, Kenny Construction, right? All of those construction companies in Chicago, right? It's not a dirty secret, but here's reality. What they do is they have their main company where all of their employees work, the services they deliver, all of that. Then what they do is they have a completely separate company who owns all of their equipment, because some of that equipment is $1 million just for one piece of equipment that's going to tear up a road. It's $1 million, a lot of them. So that the equipment that they have may be $20 million in equipment. So they have that in a completely separate company that is not tied to their regular day-to-day company that they're bidding on city and state contracts with IDOT and Chicago Department of Transportation, right? And the reason is because that company with the equipment is not doing anything that's going to create a legal issue, right? The construction company is a lot of liability there. So if that construction company, somebody fell off of one of the skyscrapers they were building and family sued all of a sudden, what are they going to do? They're going to sue that company. That company is not tied in any way to the company that has that equipment. So you say to yourself, well, how do they get to use it? It's because they rent it from that company. So they literally rent their equipment from this other company that they set up. They just don't have ownership of it, or they have personal ownership of it. I know someone raised their hand, Sandra.
Yes, this is me, Sandra, again. This is exactly what I think I need to do because I have intellectual property, and I saw this other woman. She has a huge course. She makes millions of dollars a year. And what she does, she has her stuff, like you say, in a separate LLC, and I think it's in a holding company, and she pays $1 a year to use her own IP. For her other company, she pays her one company to use the IP with another company, $1 a year to use
Correct.
her own IP, so she can license it to other companies and use it for inside another business.
Yeah, same concept, because we're that company that intellectual property is in, or this equipment is in one of these construction companies, it's not serving any purpose really. It's just there. So it's not going to get in trouble. So you just need to have, it's the same thing if you went in a car from Hertz, right? She can just have a rental agreement or a subscription or a license agreement with that other company that states that she can use that intellectual property of theirs on an as-needed basis. And here's how much she pays for it. Now, in order for it to be legal and to hold up in court, there has to be consideration on both sides, meaning that if they're letting you use something, if you're renting equipment from them, you have to be paying them for that. And it has to be fair market value. Does that help, Sandra?
Oh, wow. That's incredible. Yeah, we're going to have another session with you. This is amazing. Thank you so much.
No problem. So I'll move on to the second to last slide. And this is just a summary. I wanted you all to just have something clear to take away. And again, we talked about this before. Personal insurance is extremely important. Business insurance is important. Business insurance to be a general liability policy that protects you if somebody slips and falls. It should protect you if you slander somebody by mistake, you made a comment online, right? Things of that nature. You should have that policy. On the personal side, for every vehicle that you own, you should have insurance policy that's more than the value of your vehicle. Think about what you can run into. Don't think about the value of your vehicle. So if you see out here the average pickup truck is $80,000 these days, that's a whole nother conversation. But if you hit a pickup truck and your insurance policy only covers $25,000, now you got $60,000 liability. And you go all the way back to half hour ago, we talked about they're gonna find that money somehow, some way, right? So you want to have your insurance. Also, on a side note, when you think about estate planning, the quickest way for any of you all to create generational wealth is not building a business. That's one of the best ways to do it. If you want to create generational wealth, Rebecca and I talked about this, get life insurance, period. Very simple. Because when you pass, which all of you all will, hopefully years and years from now, at some point, you're going to leave somebody behind. Leave an insurance policy where they benefit so that they don't have to start at zero, right? And with an insurance policy, when you have a will, when you get an estate plan done, you can dictate that policy, right, doesn't necessarily pay out to them right away. So for example, in my estate plan, my money and insurance policy all goes to my trust. The trust will make disbursements to my son on a periodic basis. Well, he's 21 now, but when he turns 21, the thought is he's going to be graduating from college. When he turns 25, chances are he's probably going to get married. I think 30 is the next milestone, is probably when he's going to look to buy a house. So the insurance money that goes to the trust and the executor upon those milestones, as dictated by me and my wife, will make a payment to him at those times. Because the thought is, I don't want to give my kids, my loved ones, a bunch of money because they're going to run out and buy some Yeezy shoes, right? They may still do that. I know Landon's cracking up. But just don't give them all the money at once so they can't buy everybody's shoes. You can dictate when they get that money, right? So that's extremely important for your will and your estate plan. The second thing is your business and personal liabilities. Again, keep those separate. The legal structure, sit down with an accountant and tell them what your long-term plans are and ask them if the entity that you have today is the best vehicle to get you to that place, and let them, you all have a conversation about that, because that's going to help you. They're going to tell you about tax laws and implications of all of this stuff and everything else. And trust are not necessarily inexpensive. The thing is if you know you're going to be in a state, like if you know you're going to be in Illinois for the next 10 years, 20 years, have one done in Illinois, because every state's laws are different. For example, the estate plan that I have is 360 years long, and that's in Georgia. The state of Georgia allows a 360-year estate plan. So I think we got on this one 356 years left, right? So it's going to last forever. I think Illinois is 100 years, all right? So when you're creating a plan, you're not just creating a plan for the next couple of years, you're creating a long-term plan, and it'll cost several thousand to get that done. And then we talked about the importance of having a team, including an accountant and an estate planning attorney. And then I'll share this last slide with you, and then we'll just open it up. I'll come off of sharing and open this up. This is something that I tell people as often as I can, right? That wealthy people control assets and everybody else owns them. At first, I was going to say poor people, but that's not the case. Everybody except wealthy people believe that ownership is power, and ownership is exposure. Ownership means you're liable, okay? So what wealthy people do is almost all of them have a trust set up. Like, for example, take Tim Cook, over at Apple, right? I think he's not the chairman, he's the CEO of Apple. When he gets his compensation, his stock options every year, I think last year he got about 75 million. He took a discount. He got those stock options, but they didn't go to him. They went to his estate. They went to his trust. So what does that do? One, from a tax liability, he never received the money, so he does not pay tax on it until he actually touches the money. The second thing is, if he offended anybody and they got mad and sued him, he does not own those stocks. He doesn't own them. He can control those assets, but he doesn't own them. I'll give you one final thought. In my estate plan, and that's what I can speak to because that's what I know. So for the next 356 years, we'll have homes in there, money. I got a bank account in the trust name, all of that. Same thing with my wife. So my son can live in the house, but he doesn't have to pay bills. It won't be like if he did anything, he won't be liable. Nobody can take the house from him because he didn't do anything. But he can stay there for years. His kids, his grandkids, his great grandkids, kids for the next 360 years, 356 years, can live in that house, drive those vehicles, use that money, never get taxed on it, and never have to worry. And I don't have to worry about whether that stuff is going to be lost in a lawsuit because it can't. It's in an irrevocable trust. So I'll leave you with that. And then Sandra, I'm going to stop sharing, and then I want to hear what you have to say. You had your hand raised.
Oh no, you're confirming what I've been hearing. I think they say 75 or 70 or 75% of all real money is tied up in trust, and we really only see 30 to 25% money in the stock market and out in the open, but most of the money is tied up in trust. So we really not seeing the full ramifications of wealth and in the economy. And that's why it's so hard for like African Americans and people of color to build wealth, because you're not really seeing the full the full display of wealth. The wealth is behind closed doors that you can never see it.
Well, and yeah, and I've heard a lot of different stats. And here's the reality. This is what I tell people, that money is only green. That's it. And the laws are there for you to take advantage of and everybody else. The laws don't really care what color you are, what you look like. They don't care about that. And here's the cool thing, is that you can use the same laws that Tim Cook uses, that Elon Musk uses. You can use the same laws that all of the Oprah, Tyler, all of them. Those laws are right there available for you. The area of opportunity is understanding what's available to you. And I think, Sandra, to your point, that's where maybe a lot of us have been kind of behind the eight ball, is not knowing what's available to us. And that's why part of the conversation we want to have tonight is just to introduce you to some of these things you may or may have not have heard before.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. So Sinclair, that's all I have to present. But here I'm wide open for questions. I mean, this is a good time. If you all have any questions, throw them out there now, because this is your time.
Yeah, everybody feel free to come off mute and ask anything you can possibly think of.
I wanted to ask that, about the parent company. So my company is LLC, like multiple LLC. And if I have a parent company, does it have to be LLC or C Corp or anything? Can be.
No, how you doing, Saida?
Good. Hi.
Again, I would talk to an accountant about that. It just depends. Again, it depends on what you want that company to be able to do. The thing, well, here's the thing. It used to be Nevada and New Hampshire were the best states to incorporate, because they had private, you didn't have to disclose who the owners of the companies are. Whether it's an LLC or S Corp, C, they didn't have to disclose that. But now you have this beneficial owners information that I know I talked to a lot of the companies I work with about that, and Quandra and I spoke about that before, where now even in that case, everybody has to disclose who's the beneficial owner of those companies. So it just depends, right? It depends on what you're trying to accomplish. But you're not locked. I think the reason why people fall into LLCs is because that's what they hear on YouTube. And they think it's cheaper to start and easier to do, and it's not. It's not giving you what you think it's giving you.
So I was reached by some of the investors, and they said that, because you have LLC, we don't want to invest. And if you had like C Corp instead, if you can change the structure of your business. So I don't know if it's easier to change the structure, or should I or shouldn't. So yeah.
You can. All you got to do is have an accountant work on that for you.
Yeah, but I think it is going to be expensive.
Not really, because I don't know that the filing fee is going to be any different than starting an LLC.
Okay.
Right. The good time to explore that is now. Especially if your fiscal year begins January 1st.
Yeah.
Right. The other thing is the reason why, I don't know all of the reasons, but one of the reasons could have been that they stated that was because, again, an LLC is really just an individual. Right. So they want to invest in a company who's going to be there that can have some continuity if something ever happened to you. They want a company, not an individual.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Yep. Good to see you.